T-minus 40 seconds. T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 20 seconds. 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
How's it going, everybody? Nice to be on here again tonight and jump on and see what everyone's up to. I got a couple different things I want to talk about tonight. So just to get the ball rolling, I've been, I got all the equipment to come on here and start streaming and whatnot, and I haven't really got around to it. I've just been, kind of waiting on a time to fit in with everybody else's schedules. There's so many people that are jumping online and pumping the content out and keeping everyone informed. And honestly, that's all I care about, right? As long as we're keeping each other in the loop and, communicating, getting these communities together. But before I go into what I want to go into, right when I was just waiting for my intro to log in there, I seen a little something going on that I thought I would share with everyone. It's actually kind of nice to see this.
That picture. I know you should be in there. That's
Oh, are they gonna mess with us?
I know. There's a copy.
We'll see how much of it we can see because it's me streaming
Thank
George's
you.
stream.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks.
This is Camp Hope though right now, which is where everybody is
set up
west.
flooded yet though.
Lots of nice in Winnipeg, George.
Lots of work. Lots of work. Freedom!
Anyways, you know what, guys? You get the idea. I'm gonna sign right out of that. But all I was the only reason I wanted to jump. I just wanted to jump on there for a second because I thought maybe it'd give you guys some hope at Camp Hope. I don't know too much details about that convoy that's going on out that way, but I know George, or Freedom George, I guess as most people know him by, is out there right now. And, it's nice to see him out there. I'm sure most of you know that he was kind of like Pat's right-hand man, best friend kind of thing, when they were taking part in the convoy that happened in Ottawa. And they both ended up in jail together. And George did his time. I believe he accepted a guilty plea, which left him with his time served. So he was able to just go right back home and go back to work and all that after he was done. And Past Carrington, what's up? Kim Layson. Yep, super busy tonight. I know, right? I just noticed, of course, after I jumped on here that Wycliffe was going on tonight and a few other friends were going on at the same time after I already put the flyer out. So I'm like, you know what? I guess I'm going to come on here anyways, and I may as well. So yeah, the first thing I wanted to go into is a lot of people were asking me about the whole Chris Sky situation. Why are you all hell-bent on covering the Chris Sky story, his trial that he's gone through? So the trial that Chris is going through right now, I've been following it since day one, since everything happened. And a lot of people don't know the whole story of what exactly happened. So, I thought I would get in there and kind of explain what happened because, Chris was one of the first people that had, the state come after him the way they did. He started making a lot of noise, as most of you know. A lot of us seen his videos on the internet, and his United Non-Compliance and his, having rallies or going to restaurants and eating and showing people how to eat without the passport and what have you. But what happened is Chris became close with a guy by the name of Rob Carbone. Okay. Rob Carbone is this dude who has dual citizenship between Canada and America. Rob Carbone got a hold of Chris after, seeing that Chris was starting to build a base of Canadians, that people were interested in Chris. He started talking with Chris and trying to get Chris to invest with him in certain I want to say money schemes at this point, but at the time Chris didn't realize that that's what it was that he was getting involved in. Rob Carbone had him believe under the impression that he was brokering certain types of deals. So much so that Chris, I don't have to hide this now because it just came out into court the other day. Like, Chris had $100,000 tied up with Rob Carbone. When Chris started to realize who Rob Carbone really was, they started to have a falling out in friendships, and they got so close that they had, Chris had the key to his building, and they became really close. And a bad friendship gone sour. But what happened is Rob started to, say all this ridiculous stuff about Chris. And at one point, he said that Chris allegedly threatened to assassinate the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford. He said that Chris, threatened his life and a few others' lives. And it was clearly completely false. But the problem is, let me just get a drink here. The problem is at the time when Rob called the police department to make these complaints, Chris was under scrutiny, and the government was pissed at him for showing people how to, just say you're exempt and walk in anyways and do all these things. So, somehow Rob said he had a recording of Chris making all these threats and yada, 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 and all these things that never actually ended up materializing. But at the time, Chris was going to be charged with 3 separate counts of uttering death threats to an official, even though he didn't. Pretty serious charges. So one day, Chris is at his house, and he leaves to go to the gym with his wife. When he leaves, there's a undercover police car that he didn't realize was police at the time down the road. And they began to follow Chris down the road. So when they were following Chris down the road, they ended up passing in front of his vehicle and slamming the brakes on in front of Chris's car. Okay. So when they did this, all Chris seen was, forget this hat. All Chris seen was 2 men in an unmarked vehicle charge at him with guns drawn at him. Okay. So he had no idea who they were. So what he did was, obviously he wasn't going to plow through them, but you're driving down the road and someone pulls in front of you and pulls 2 guns out on you, and it's, with someone beside them, you're going to get the hell out of there. You're going to think about your life first. So he goes to back out, move straight ahead and carry on forward. And he goes around them and takes off. Well, now that he did this, they laid 2 new charges on him because they said that he was dangerous driving and that he was assaulting a police officer, because by the way he backed his vehicle up and almost hit the other police officer, they were trying to classify that as assaulting an officer. So he has 5 charges on him, and he has for, about 2 years now, since 2020. But the big thing about this is that with these 5 charges that he hasn't been found guilty of, they've been able to put him on a no-fly list, okay? And he can't drive. He had stipulations. He had a surety, which was his wife, another surety, who's his friend, Dr. Z. So, this is the one part where it started to get really scary, because it was like, this guy's not even found guilty of anything. And all of a sudden, you can put him on a no-fly list so he can't travel. You make it so he can't drive a vehicle. And he's got all these crazy stipulations on his rights. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, because I'm following the case, like I said, and I have been since the start. And I can tell you with all confidence that this is all going to get acquitted. Based on the fact that Carbone's testimony was all over the place. It was just full of lies. And when the defense lawyer, Chris's lawyer, went to make the statement before leaving court the other day, he was, insinuating that, you can't take Carbone's evidence. And after he said this and that and whatever, and it's just so obvious. And then the police officers who had the story going, they testified at 2 different things, right? So the first day, the one officer went up. The second day, the next officer went up. They gave completely different stories. One officer said that they were both wearing masks and they both had police vests on. The other police officer said that they didn't have masks on at all. So their evidence is conflicting, and everything that Chris said was bang on in not in any type of confliction. So now when they go back February 28th at 9:00 a.m., it's going to be the ruling from the Crown. But like I said, I would guarantee, I don't want to say I'll guarantee my life on it, but they're going to be dropped. But even if they are dropped, what does that say about the current state of our country? That you can be not, found guilty of something, and you can just take away, someone's right to travel, someone's right to drive, people are dragging you through the mud. The media is calling him a terrorist and saying that he tried to, utter death threats to a premier and whatnot. It's all insanity. It's what it is. So that's why I wanted to touch on that story a little bit. It's going to be interesting. And the next thing is this weekend is Reunite Ontario. Guys, let's do it. Let's make it happen. Let's reunite Ontario. I don't know what the hell happened. There's a whole lot of drama going on in this freedom movement right now. And, I just don't pay attention to it. That's not my shtick. I get along with everybody. I always have. But, things are getting crazy right now. They really are. And we need more people on the same team. And I understand there's people that are on our team who aren't actually on our team. But until we find out who those people are, let's get it together. And, why are we trying to take pressure off the system? I understand some people are saying there was a time and a place for protests, and I get that. But who are you to encourage people not to protest or to not, go to these events? Let's hope everything works out good for this thing that's going on out west right now. It seems like we don't have a democracy here in Canada anymore. And, what are we going to do? Sit down and shut up? Where's that going to get us? What is that going to do for us? It's going to do absolutely nothing for us. So I don't think we should be going around discouraging people, from doing that. Some more good news. Who just landed on the ground a couple hours ago is our lovely friend Christine Anderson from the EU, the European Union Parliament. She is the lady that has really been giving Trudeau hell all the way from overseas there. And she's going to be doing a tour next week. I'm going to be jumping on a live with Beth Ann before that, and we'll give you some information, and where you can get tickets and what have you if you're interested in that. Yeah, so that is that. I'm gonna get right to this video next. So yeah, if you guys are on here right now, if you guys can share this out, hit the like button. Like I said, I'm just getting started on going on these lives on YouTube and that. So you'll really help the algorithm out if you can go and hit like, leave a comment, share this. Those things will really help with the algorithm get this out there. So I don't know how many of you guys seen this happen today, but this made me sick to my stomach. This is what literally made me go, I am coming on the internet tonight. I need to watch this with you guys and comment at the exact same time. So as we know, tomorrow, the Public Order Emergency Commission inquiry is complete. So Justice Rouleau has all of his findings rolled out into a piece of paper. They're going to be released 2 hours before they are to the public, to the press. But the press have to be in the room and they can't report on it and yada, 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 all this crap. And then Justice Rouleau is going to deliver his findings at 12 o'clock. And I believe I'm going to stream that too. I may as well. But yeah, let's go. Let's see what how they're getting ready for this and how they're prepping for it and who exactly is going to take the fall. So this is what Jagmeet Singh had to say today to all of this that's going on here. This is how he wanted to go about dealing with this.
Vote that represented a failure.
Sorry, let's start that over.
The Emergencies Act was invoked. That represented a failure. It represented a failure on a number of fronts. A failure on all levels of government to respond.
Okay, let's stop right there. A failure on all levels of government to respond? I agree. You're right on that. Let's keep going.
The serious problem of the convoy. It meant that the Prime Minister didn't take it seriously. The Premier certainly.
The Prime Minister didn't take it seriously. Really? He ended up invoking the War Measures Act. Are you fucking kidding me?
He didn't take it seriously. Doug Ford ignored it entirely. And the mayor of Ottawa ignored the seriousness of the problem. And the problem was really clear. We had citizens that were being harassed and intimidated. Food banks where staff were being harassed. This was an ongoing.
Oh my God, it kills me to watch. Food banks were being harassed. People wearing masks were being harassed. Anybody who was there knows that's complete bullshit. There were homeless people that we were bringing food to. Not me, everybody was bringing food to. They were eating so much they couldn't even eat anymore. And we had to find something to do with that food because they wouldn't accept anymore at the food bank because they couldn't handle it. There was too much food.
Thing, not one-off scenarios. We had people that were wearing masks, were being intimidated and harassed in the streets. People faced the worst lockdowns that they'd ever experienced throughout the pandemic in Ottawa. The citizens faced the worst of it because of the convoy business.
Did you hear that? People faced the worst pandemic lockdowns and restrictions because of the convoy. The nerve this piece of garbage has to say that. To look that camera in the eye and say that is unbelievable. This piece of garbage, we all struggled because of him, because of their stupid government and everything that they've done to us. All the lockdowns were on them. All the businesses closed because the BIA decided to do that. The businesses that stayed open during the convoy made more money in a few weeks than they did in the previous 2 years because the government shut them down.
Businesses were shut down. Kids were struggling to go to school. People couldn't sleep at night. It was pretty horrible. And given how bad things were and how people were being targeted, all levels of government failed the people of Ottawa and also failed workers. Thousands of workers lost thousands of hours of work because of shutdowns at the border. And none of this was taken seriously. There was a failure of policing. It's very clear that all levels of policing also failed to take this seriously. It should never have got to this point. And so that's why I think that the commission, the work of the commission, is so important to identify how we can prevent those failures from happening, because it was as a result of all those levels of failure that we had to invoke the Emergencies Act. And that it was in no way a success. It was an example of the serious failures that occurred to get us to that point. So I'm hoping the commission will highlight how we can avoid getting to that point in the future.
See what he did right there? The last thing in the world these people are going to do or want to do is take accountability for their actions. They're going to play the blame game. They're going to try and pin this entire thing on the police. Just like we seen the entire time we were watching the Public Order Emergency Commission. You guys seen it. We all seen it. The provincial government was saying, oh, it's all the federal government's fault. The federal government was saying, oh, it was the police's fault. The police were saying, oh, you know, there was a problem with the municipal government, and the regional councillor should have said something. It was this circle of blame that just continued going around and around and around. And nobody wanted to be accountable for what they did.
Future.
What do you want to see addressed in the report once it is tabled?
What do you want to see in the report once it's tabled, which will be tomorrow at 12 noon?
Well, I'm hoping that there is a serious consideration of the problems in policing, the fact that there was a lot of evidence that came forward of police colluding with the convoy, supporting the convoy. And it's
police colluding with the convoy? Do you understand this? This guy's trying to say that organizers of the convoy and the police colluded together, which is completely false.
important to keep in mind, the convoy made their goals very clear. The convoy, the organized.
Get ready for it. This is the worst part. The convoy made their goals very clear. Listen to what this coward is about to say.
You know, there's maybe many people that maybe didn't know this, or maybe people that were unaware or weren't participants, but the organizers, the central organizers, made it very clear what their goal was. Their goal was to overthrow the government. They didn't hide that. They stated it very boldly on a website. They've repeated it in numerous press conferences. They wanted to overthrow a democratically elected government with a committee of their own choosing. I mean,
they wanted to overthrow the government. So full of shit. Nobody wanted to overthrow the government. That's why everybody reached out to politicians. That's why everybody emailed their elected officials. That's why everybody had a team of doctors they were trying to have a debate with your doctors with. Do you know how easy it would have been to do what he just said? Nobody had any interest in doing that. There were way more than enough people there to do that, but everybody was looking to go about this in a legal, lawful way and try and get the attention of the people that we pay to serve us to do what's right.
it was very clear what their goal was. And the fact that...
Sorry, I'm going to stop there. Past Carrington, what website, what threats? So let's get into this quickly for a second. What I believe he is speaking about, okay, is the memorandum of understanding that Canada Unity put out, okay? And let me tell you what, that wasn't to overthrow your government. If you're going to overthrow your government, you don't write them a nice piece of paper and let them know that you want them to be accountable and resign and find people who are qualified to be in those positions. That's not how you overthrow a government.
Policing and other levels, other security forces were colluding with these folks is deeply concerning. Like, their goal was not an innocuous goal. Their goal was to overthrow government and to replace it like in a fascist way without having any election.
See the big buzzwords that they like to use? In a fascist way.
Without having elected officials. Pretty serious that security forces were still working with them despite their very clear stated goal. So that's something that I hope is addressed. And again, the ultimate failures that got us to this point, I hope are addressed. What can be done in the future to prevent that from happening?
And you know what I have to say to that? If you really thought if they really thought that James Bowder was trying to overthrow the government, or somebody was, do you really think that they wouldn't be sitting in jail right now with some wild charges? No, because that's why you needed to, do some trumped up political charges like mischief and jail someone for longer than they ever have been before on a mischief, bail release. It's unbelievable. But, Jagmeet can go on and he can say this shit all he wants. He can outright lie to the people he serves. Because guess what? We've already had a public order emergency commission. We've already had the inquiry, and we know what was said. Do you guys remember this? Do you remember who, what's his name? We'll pull it up right here. Pat Morris. I'm trying to think if he was the OPP, I believe. Morris then confirmed what many Freedom Convoy supporters had been claiming, that the presence of the protest in downtown core of Ottawa severely reduced crime in the area. Morris said that the complete lack of violent crime was shocking to him personally. Well, how could you overthrow a government or think that there's a threat of overthrowing the government without any crime? Let's have a peek at this video.
How accurate we were, and there was
Sorry, guys, just give me a minute. Of course, we got a little buffering going on here. I got a neighbor that I just told they can use my Wi-Fi. This is what I get for being the nice guy. I said, yeah, you can use my Wi-Fi for a couple days here. And, then I'm on here with you guys. And
how accurate we were. And there was, I would say, the lack of violent crime was shocking. Even in the arrests and charges, considering the whole thing in totality, I think there were 10 charges for violent crime, 6 of which were against police officers. Pertain.
So can you imagine? So guys, there was there was 10 violent crimes the entire time that was going on there. 6 were against police officers. And Brendan Miller brought that all up and stated, those 6 crimes that were assaults on an officer or whatever, 2 of those were from Randy Hillier, which we've seen in a video where Randy literally pushed a barrier around outside, and it touched an officer, and they charged him with assault. So we know what really happened there. But I called it a long time ago. I seen this play coming. You know what's going to happen tomorrow? And let's hope that I'm wrong. But I bet you the government gets away with everything that they did. Everything. Okay? Because they're going to want a fall person for this. And they've had this planned for quite some time now. So who better than to take the fall other than Brenda Lucki, who's just about ready to resign from the RCMP? Now we had, this is an old article, Tyler Shandro. Alberta Justice Minister calls on Ottawa to remove RCMP Commissioner Lucki, and he did so during the inquiry. Alberta Justice Minister Tyler Shandro says his province has lost confidence in RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki. He's calling on Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino to remove her. Chandra says Lucki has failed to provide accountability in 2 significant public inquiries. The Public Order Emergency Commission, which is investigating whether the federal government was justified in invoking the Emergencies Act, and the Mass Casualty Commission, an independent inquiry into the 2020 Nova Scotia mass shooting that claimed 22 lives. We can't forget that happened when Lucki was working. Almost for an entire day, there was literally someone driving around in an RCMP vehicle dressed up as an RCMP officer, killing people. And she didn't even take any heat for that either. Chandra said Lucki failed to provide accountability in both inquiries and did not prove to Canadians that RCMP leadership could make change to ensure that errors of judgment would not happen again. Instead, Commissioner Lucki, in sworn testimony, has dodged accountability and excused her actions. Over the past 2 years, Commissioner Lucki has failed to deal with the RCMP's history of systemic racism in forthright and public manner and has risked the integrity of an investigation into mass shooting. A lot of people think and know that the RCMP have been using these shootings to glorify the gun grab that the Liberals want to do and to take legal, lawful gun owners' guns away from them. So, that's what I think is going to happen tomorrow. I think they're all going to get up there, and I think that Lucki is just, everything's going to be the police's fault. That's what they're going to say, because why not? And you know what Lucki's going to do? She's going to resign. She's going to get a full pension, and then guess what? She'll probably get a position as a cabinet minister, or even better, there's some seats open in the Senate. So little slime ball Trudeau, why wouldn't he just throw her in that position, right? The corruption is unbelievable. Now, what did we want to get to next here? Oh, this is good. So I'm sure a lot of you know that, now that Elon's taken over Twitter, it's been a free-for-all. It's for the most part as good as you can. It's been way less censored than any other platform. And, we found out a lot of dirty things about what's been going on there. So Republican leader Marjorie Taylor Greene had 5 minutes to speak to the former panel, who is right now under an active investigation. So, let's pull this up and have a peek at what's going on over here.
This is Ms. Green for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Baker, Ms. Gaddy, Mr. Roth, and Ms. Navaroli. You can consider your speech canceled during my time because you canceled mine. You see, you permanently banned my personal Twitter account.
I love that. So can you imagine an elected member of the House had her speech banned? She serves the people, and she wasn't even allowed to talk to them on the internet. So she just put him in his place and said, you know what? During these 5 minutes, you can't talk. You're going to listen to me while I talk. And that's how it should go.
And it was my campaign account also. So let's talk about election interference, shall we? January 2nd, 2002, you permanently banned my Twitter account. This was the account that I would put my campaign ads on, raise money on, fight back when attacked with lies, and be able to talk to my voters in my district. But you banned it. And then let me explain. My account was not reinstated until November 21st, 2022. That was after my election on November 8th. At your company or your former company where you worked, Twitter employees, over 98% of them donate to Democrats. So while you coordinated with DHS, the FBI, the CIA, our government, and outside groups to permanently shadow ban conservative Americans and candidates like me, and the former president of the United States, President Donald J. Trump, you were censoring and wrongfully violating our First Amendment free speech rights. Guess what? None of you hold security clearances. None of you are elected, and none of you represent 750,000 people like I do. Let's explain. 52 United States Law 10101. No person shall intimidate, threaten, coerce, or attempt to stop any other person for the purpose of interfering with their rights to vote or to vote as he may choose. You didn't shadow ban or permanently ban my Democrat opponent. No, you did that to me. And that was wrong, and it was against the law. You see, not only that, was it me that you violated my First Amendment rights? You violated countless conservative Americans. These were doctors that were trying to tell the truth about COVID, doctors that were having success treating people with ivermectin that you all would not allow to be talked about on your platform. These were parents complaining about their school boards teaching gender lies in their schools, biological males entering their daughters' bathrooms and sports. These were also people questioning the 2020 election. And guess what? That's Americans' First Amendment right. These were people talking about voting machines. You know what? Democrats did that in 2019 before the 2020 election. On Twitter, people could question elections such as 2016, saying Hillary won. But in 2020, no one could question elections saying Trump won. You abuse the power of a large corporation, big tech, to censor Americans.
Look at his face.
And you want to know
Roth.
something? Guess what?
Listen to this
I'm so
part.
glad that you're censored down. I'm so
Listen to
glad
this
you've
part,
lost your
guys.
jobs. Thank God Elon Musk bought Twitter. And you know what? Let's talk about something a little bit further. It's amazing to me, Mr. Roth, as the head and trust of safety at Twitter, your ability, or should I say inability, to remove child porn. Now, here's something that disgusts me about you.
Look at
In
his
your
face.
doctoral
Not even
dissertation
phased.
entitled Gay Data, you argued that minors should have access to Grindr, an adult male gay hookup app. Minors? Really? You know, Elon Musk took over Twitter and he banned 44,000 accounts that were promoting child porn. You permanently banned my Twitter account, but you allowed child porn all over Twitter. Twitter had become a platform, you said, connecting queer young adults. You also wrote on Twitter in 2010, can high school students ever meaningfully consent to sex with their teachers? In 2021, while you were the director of trust and safety on Twitter, an underage boy and his mother announced a lawsuit against Twitter because Twitter was benefiting from and refused to remove a lewd video featuring this boy and another minor. That is repulsive. But you violated me. What were my tweets? Okay, let's talk about them. I was talking about the deaths being reported on VAERS. By the way, that's on the CDC website. I was also saying that I didn't think any entity should enforce a non-FDA approved vaccine or mask. Guess what? A lot of people agreed with me, but you called that COVID misinformation. By the way, I'm a member of Congress and you're not. I also said the controversial COVID-19 vaccines should not be forced on our military. You want to know something? Republicans stopped that in the NDAA.
Ladies, time has expired.
And your time has expired. I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes.
You said you didn't talk with the FBI that day. Did you talk to the FBI about the?
What a bombshell that Marjorie Taylor dropped there with that, eh? Like, whew. It looks so good to see these people, you know, people who were complicit, people who just nonchalantly didn't give a shit about your speech, didn't give a shit about a democratic practice, didn't give a shit about shutting you off because they have different views than you. So to see them come under fire is amazing. And we're just going to keep seeing this happening. You know, we're all stressed out right now with everything we've been through, guys, but it's just going to keep happening, and it's not going to be good for them. It's going to be much more enjoyable for us to watch going forward. So here's one more clip of that I wanted to show you. This is just another 5-minute clip with another Republican member who had their turn to say what they wanted to say.
Taibbi, a respected reporter who published much of the Twitter files, said, quote, Twitter's contact with FBI was constant and pervasive, as if it were a subsidiary. Now, I want to better understand why he would suggest that. Mr. Roth, while at Twitter, how many meetings did you have with the FBI?
I couldn't say for sure, but I
More
would
than
say
10?
That's a
More than
reasonable
20?
estimate. I couldn't say for sure.
More than 50?
That seems a bit high.
Many meetings with the FBI. Well, we know how many FBI agents worked at Twitter while you were there?
I don't believe any active FBI
Former
agents.
FBI agents. How many worked there while you were there?
I'm aware of perhaps 2.
Well, we know of at least 9 because they started the BU group chat, BU for Bureau. Now, Mr. Roth, did the FBI ever ask you to share information like users' communication data without going through proper legal channels?
No, they did not, and I would have refused if they had.
That's correct. I see that
Sure
you
you
denied
woulda.
Agent Chan's request for access to Twitter's data feed. What's sick isn't that you would deny it. It's that the FBI would even ask you for the private data of American citizens without going through legal channels of the law. Now, I want to remind you, Mr. Roth, that you are under oath. Did the FBI ever ask you to do anything that was illegal or questionably legal?
I'm not a lawyer, but certainly not to the best of my recollection or knowledge.
Now, from the hearing that I've been a part of today, it's almost impossible to tell where the FBI ends and where Twitter begins. We have Mr. Baker here, a former FBI agent, and there seems to be a revolving door between the FBI and Twitter itself. Even Mr. Baker said that there was no collusion with the federal government and Twitter. But Mr. Baker, that's you. You are the collusion between the federal government and the FBI. And now with it, this is such a problem because we're seeing censorship all over. Mr. Roth, Miss Gaddy, did either of you approve the shadow banning of my account at Lauren Boebert? Yes or no?
No, I did not.
Not to the best of my recollection.
Well, let me refresh your memory because on March 12th, 2021, and Mr. Roth, I know you looked at it because Fascist Twitter 1.0 had a public interest exceptions policy, which means for members of Congress to be shadow banned, it had to go before you, Mr. Roth. So I'll ask again, did you shadow ban my account? Yes or no?
Again, not to the best of my recollection.
So the answer is, Mr. Roth, yes, you did. I found out last night from Twitter staff that you suppressed my account for this tweet. It's a freaking joke about Hillary Clinton being angry that she couldn't rig her election. It's a joke. But in response, being the sinister overlords that you all are, you placed a 90-day account filter so I could not be found.
Nice,
and now
eh?
we see here that Twitter staff said the visibility filter on my account excluded me from top searches, prevented notifications for non-followers, and much more. This is considered an aggressive visibility filter. You silenced members of Congress from communicating with their constituents. You silenced me from communicating with the American people over a freaking joke. Now, who the hell do you think that you are? Election interference? Yeah, I would say that that was taking place because of you four sitting here. The Hunter Biden laptop story was suppressed. A sitting member of Congress was suppressed. A sitting president was banned from Twitter. You know, I bet that Putin is sitting in the Kremlin wishing he had as much election interference as you four here today. We've heard about threats to democracy. Well, what about shutting down a duly elected member of Congress? This is fundamental to our nation's governance, and you all attacked that very foundation. 230 protections? Well, those are for publishers, not for editors. And it's clear you were not acting as publishers, you were acting as editors. And Mr. Chairman, I think it's far past time that we remove 230 protections for big tech platforms who are abusing this protection. And let me just say, I'm not angry for myself. I'm not angry because I was silenced. I can reach out to Elon and to his staff, and I can see what's happened. And I can sit here today and hold you all in account. I am angry for the millions of Americans who were silenced because of your decisions, because of your actions, because of your collusion with the federal government. They can't reach out to Elon. They can't sit here today and hold you into account. We don't know where the FBI ends and Twitter begins. Free speech and even Twitter. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
The lady.
You know, it's so nice to see that. The sad thing about that, though, is like you're not going to see that kind of accountability in Canada. You're not going to see someone get up there and yell, you know, like that and protect themselves. You know, what the hell is going on out there anyway? What is going on here? Look at this. Is this normal, folks? Every day, somewhere different? It's unreal, eh? You get the idea. This is happening every day somewhere else. Swear they're not playing games with us right now, though, right, guys? Guys, this just aired literally right during our stream.
Of grave crisis.
So I was going to play this
fanatical men are attempting to destroy
as our
the
ending
unity and the
for
freedom
tonight.
of Canada.
So if you want to tune in, this was just aired on Rebel News. This is the first episode. Enjoy it. It's only 18 minutes, but I'm going to watch it with you guys right now.
Flourishes in Canada.
We don't always agree, and that's okay.
Because individual liberty is cherished in Canada.
Our government will always defend freedom of expression and freedom of peaceful assembly.
It has now been demonstrated to us by a few misguided persons.
After evidence of increased ideologically motivated violent extremism activity across the country,
just how fragile a democratic society can be,
it became clear that local and provincial authorities needed more tools to restore order and keep people safe.
These are matters of the utmost gravity, and I want to tell you what the government is doing to deal with them.
The federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act.
I liked him before the pandemic. Trudeau? Yeah. I was like, he's a handsome guy. Yeah. Seems sweet. Yeah. You know, it's like good looking guy, confident, good talker. Yeah. And then during the pandemic, I'm like, oh, you're a fucking dictator. Yeah. Oh, you don't like criticism. You're trying to shut down criticism by saying that all your critics are misogynists and racists. Yeah. You hear he said that about the trucking people, the truckers? He called them all misogynists and racists. Oof. Yeah, he's gross.
But Justin Trudeau, I mean, I thought he was kind of a cool guy. Then I started to read what he said. This is a couple of weeks ago. He was, or maybe this is September, but he was talking about people who are not vaccinated. He said they don't believe in science. They're often misogynistic, often racist. No, they're not.
That was not smart of him at all.
Right. He said, but they take up space. And with that, we have to make a choice in terms of a leader as a country. Do we tolerate these people? It's like, tolerate them. Now you do sound like him.
So let's be clear. This is a defining moment in the history of Canada and the history of the English-speaking West. The Emergencies Act is martial law. It has never been invoked in the history of that country. Now, by law, the Emergencies Act is allowed only in emergencies, in, quote, urgent and critical situations that seriously endanger the lives, health, or safety of Canadians. What's happening now does not qualify. What's happening in Canada now is not an emergency. Here's what it looked like this weekend.
I'm heading down on this traveler's road, and I won't find peace till the day we rest in harmony. Tell me what's so wrong if I choose to disagree. taking how we want till we're living free. Mm-hmm. Fighting till we're living free. Oh, standing in unity.
On August 22nd, 1914, Canadian Parliament passed a bill to bring the War Measures Act into law. This was done to provide the federal government extraordinary powers to bypass other already existing laws in light of the First World War. It also allowed the government to bypass existing protections afforded to Canadians against their own government's overreach. The act allowed the government to legally censor information, arrest or deport Germans and Ukrainians from Canada, and to forcibly dispose of property, all to regain control of transportation, trade, and order. The act was invoked 2 more times throughout Canadian history, next during World War II, and then most famously during the FLQ crisis in the 1970s. Pierre Trudeau Sr., the Prime Minister at the time, invoked the act, which allowed Canadian authorities to arrest 450 people who allegedly assisted, conspired, or were a part of the Quebec-based domestic terror group. FLQ cells did commit kidnappings and murders isolated to Quebec. And the invocation of then the War Measures Act was still heavily contested and criticized, as the law technically applied to every Canadian. To deal with a crisis in Quebec, the civil liberties of every Canadian were suspended.
How far would you go with that? How far would you extend that? Well, just watch me. At reducing civil liberties?
In 1988, the War Measures Act was repealed. Then Parliament passed a new law, the Emergencies Act, under the auspices that this new piece of legislation would have a much higher bar for invocation and would then conform to the newly adopted Charter of Rights and Freedoms, or at least that's what they told us.
I want to be very clear. The scope of these measures will be time limited, geographically targeted, as well as reasonable and proportionate.
The Emergencies Act needs to meet a very specific threshold, which meant it could not be invoked whenever the government felt.
The responsibility of a prime minister is to make the tough calls and keep people safe.
A catastrophe or crisis at hand must rise to the Canadian Security Intelligence Service's legal definition of what constitutes a national security threat, as detailed in Section 2 of the law, which created the agency.
I believe that the invocation of the Act provided very useful tools to law enforcement.
Useful tools, but not necessary tools.
During the onset of COVID-19 and the restrictions on civil liberties which followed, the federal government debated the invocation of the Emergencies Act under a public welfare crisis. The law could only be used if all provinces declared their inabilities to deal with the pandemic. And just like we've seen, they were more than capable of keeping us safe. A pandemic, in this case COVID-19, needed to pose a threat to life and property, social disruption, or a breakdown of essential goods and services. It needed to be so hard and so difficult to deal with that no other law in Canada could stop it. Police and public health authorities would need to make the case for requiring additional, extraordinary tools not permitted under existing laws and not allowed under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That threshold for COVID was never met. The existing laws that federal and provincial governments used to deal with COVID discriminated against us based on our choices. These existing laws took us out of work, shut down our economy. These laws subjected us to outrageous fines and unjust arrests if we dared not to follow their arbitrary rules. These rules stopped our ability to travel, to cross the border, for leisure or for work.
You deserve a government that's going to continue to say, get vaccinated. And you know what? If you don't want to get vaccinated, that's your choice. But don't think you can get on a plane or a train beside vaccinated people and put them at risk.
On January 28th, the federal government deemed all unvaccinated truckers as non-essential in their cross-border deliveries after 2 years of working safely without a vaccine mandate. The federal government then applied the same mandatory 2-week quarantine on all unvaccinated truckers that everyone else who was unvaccinated faced when they entered the country without a jab. This made it logistically impossible for these truckers to work. According to the Canadian Trucker Alliance, the mandate removed 15 to 30,000 truckers from their jobs, which was an action that not only put our economy at risk, but thousands of Canadian families and their economic welfare as well. For months, nurses to firemen, teachers to waitresses, Canadians who lost their livelihoods protested against the vaccine mandates in cities and towns all across our country. But the vaccine mandate for truckers was the catalyst for the single largest human rights demonstration in modern Canadian history. It was the breaking point, which spawned the Freedom Convoy of late January and February 2022.
We know the way through this pandemic is by getting everyone vaccinated. And the overwhelming majority, close to 90% of Canadians, have done exactly that. The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing do not represent the views of Canadians who have been there for each other, who know.
Truckers from all across the country gathered in the thousands, bringing with them tens of thousands more on a transnational road trip to Ottawa. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of accounts within this story, but this will focus on the response from the federal government.
The federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act to supplement provincial and territorial capacity to address the blockades and occupations.
On February 14th, the Trudeau government invoked the Emergencies Act under the Public Order section. This allowed the government to freeze bank accounts, forcibly manipulate others to do their bidding with or without their consent, to commandeer tow truck companies against the conscience rights of the owners, and to stomp on our civil liberties, quite literally in some cases. However, written within the Emergencies Act, it states that a public inquiry must follow within 60 days of the use of the law. It's a fail-safe to stop authoritarian governments from using this extraordinary power whenever they please. But it's also to determine if the invocation of the act was necessary and justified at all.
The public's legitimate right to know why the government proclaimed an emergency and whether the actions it took were appropriate.
Remember the thresholds.
My name is Brendan Miller of Foster LLP, and I am counsel to Freedom Corp, which is an organization that represents the protesters of which attended Ottawa in January and February of 2022. My colleague, Ms. Beth Sheba Vandenberg of Foster LLP, is my co-counsel on this matter, as well as the solicitors of record, both Mr. Keith Wilson, King's Counsel, as well as Ms. Eva Chipiuk, who is counsel to the Convoy. With respect to sort of everyone's given an overview of the theory of their case, it is our view that there was no justification whatsoever to invoke the Emergencies Act. The Emergencies Act requires several things. One, it could be invoked due to espionage and sabotage. Are you going to hear any evidence about espionage and sabotage? The answer to that is no. Two, it could be invoked on the basis of clandestine or deceptive foreign influence, or foreign influence that involves a threat to a person. Are you going to hear evidence about that? The answer to that is no. It also could be invoked on the basis of threats or use of acts of serious violence against persons or property. Are you going to hear evidence of violence against persons or property? The answer is no. Lastly, it can also be invoked if there is a group or persons trying to destroy or overthrow by violence the system of government of Canada. Are you going to hear evidence about individuals trying to do that? The answer is no. And the answer is that there was no reasonable and probable grounds to invoke the Emergencies Act, and that the government exceeded their jurisdiction, both constitutionally and legislatively, in doing so. Thank you.
In terms of news coverage, Rebel News dominated the trucker convoy, and we did it just by being there. From British Columbia to Ottawa, we had people embedded on the ground or on the road, sharing real stories and countering the lies and propaganda from the federal colonized mainstream media.
I see a lot of cameras, a lot of independent journalists, because when people say, what do we do about the media? I say you become the media, that's what you do. The media acts like a party, the media party. It's a subsidiary of the Liberal Party. So you've got to tell the story yourself.
It would only make sense we would do the same for the Public Order Emergency Commission, the aforementioned fail-safe tasked with examining the government's actions. We sent rebels from all over the country to cover this commission. Thanks to your support at truckercommission.com, we were able to remain until the very end.
I could feel it sort of ripple through my body, and I would feel that my nerves were still frayed. I kept hearing them like phantom horns. I kept hearing them in my head.
That's not anything to do with national security. I did not expect that. I did not expect the hearing to be what it was.
I'm heading out on this traveler's road, leaving all behind to revive my soul. And I won't find peace till the day we rest in harmony.
Well, that is the gist of that, folks. So, you heard, I have that voice stuck in my head of Brendan Miller going over the CSIS Act Section 2, where he goes over the 4 different requirements of how you can invoke the Emergency Measures Act and how they didn't meet those requirements. And, how Alan Vigneault, the director of CSIS, took the stand, and he even said, none of these were met. Tomorrow is a huge day for Canadian history. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't have very high hopes, and I wouldn't be surprised if you guys don't have high hopes either. But let's hope for some justice. So remember, at 12 o'clock tomorrow, guys, they're going to be tabling this motion. I'm going to see if I can get it live on here, and I might cover it on here. So if that's something you guys might want to see tomorrow, go to my YouTube, like it, subscribe it, turn your notifications on, because I'm going to have it on tomorrow. But going forward from here, every Tuesday and Thursday night, I'm going to start coming on here like this and doing a broadcast. It's going to be a lot better put together than tonight. I just did this last minute. Yeah. So, everyone have a great weekend. No matter what the findings are tomorrow, there's convoys and events going on all across the country this weekend. So make sure you're doing your part. Make sure you're out there with the people, connecting, building communities, and let's hope for a good day tomorrow. I'll see you guys on here tomorrow, and if not, I'll see you next Tuesday.